Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my wrap-up. It's probably been like a day or two for you. It's been like 30 seconds for me. That's why I look the same. But I just wanted to get into my romance wrap-up for the month of August. If you guys didn't see part 1, I talk about all the other genres that I read in the month of August, but this video is going to be the 8 romance books that I read because I needed to split the video up somehow. So much like part 1, I'm going to organize this by my least liked book all the way up to my most liked book, and this is where I have my favorite book of the month that I read in the month of August in it. So stay tuned to the end of the video for that one. So starting at the very beginning, I actually have a 2-star book. I had a really successful reading month. I think this is my only 2-star book. Everything else was 3 stars and up, which was very exciting. So starting with my only like womp womp book, I read Retreat by Jay Crownover this month, and I love Jay. I love Jay as a person. She is one of my favorite authors, and I just adore her personality and most of her books. I read this one. I didn't enjoy this one. So this tried to be so many different things. This follows a girl and her best friend who are like in their late 20s, I think, and they're both like successful businesswomen, and her friend convinces her to go on this vacation with her that is like a Wild West trail riding resort type of vacation where you're like trail riding out into the wilderness for days. Now, you guys probably know where I'm going with this review. I'm pretty critical about books that have horses in them, specifically riding, and where horses are like one of the main focuses of the story, because I am an equestrian, I have horses, I've ridden my entire life. So I'm a little critical when authors make the decision to include that, but not research actual horse information. And this is one of those cases where I can tell that Jay is not a horse person. There's not much in this book that I was like frowning at, but there was just a lot of simple things that I was like, oh, you probably could have just Googled that very easily. And it's also one of the situations where they take them on a really intense ride, and this is supposed to be one of those vacations where like the people don't have to have any riding experience to be a part of it, but they're literally riding for days and days and days. Like, people who don't ride regularly, if you're in the saddle for an hour, you hurt, let alone trekking off into the wilderness. So basically we follow them on this vacation where they're going with these like gruff cowboy type men out into the wilderness, and she falls for, of course, the like really gruff brooding type of man who is very rude to her and is very alpha male, but like not in a fun way. And it's their relationship, but also this story starts to try and turn into this like thriller survival type story. As it progresses, like a lot more happens on this vacation that I think was necessary. Like, I think more is packed into this book than I personally liked. Like, I would have been fine with just that as the story. She goes off, she rides horses, it's a cowboy, weird adventure type of story. But then we start to get into like this drug lord situation, and stuff starts happening out in the wilderness. They start to find like drugs, and like shots are fired, and it just turns into this big dramatic mess that I personally just didn't care about. So things that I didn't like: the pacing of this book was weird. Again, had it just been that little romance on a vacation, I would have been fine with it, because I think she could have like elongated that and made it more believable. But we went from this guy being a complete dick to our main character and her just like swooning real hard over him, to her walking in on him in the shower jerking off to her, and it turns sexual real fast. Like, there's no awkwardness between them. It's just like, oh, we doing this right now. And I was like, okay, I guess, sure. And that's kind of how the whole story progressed. Like, there was a lot of like slow growth, and then all of a sudden we are boning, and then slow growth, and then we are boning again. Like, it was just like weird pacing, especially when we got into that weird, like really dramatic survival type of part of the story. It was strange. So pros for the book though, the sex scenes, while they were weirdly stilted in the story, they were steamy. Like, she knows how to write a good sex scene. It was a little weird that you just kind of get tossed into them, like with very little build-up, but like once you're in it, I was like, hey now, got that, okay. So all in all, I gave this 2 stars. I probably won't continue on with the series. I will read other Jay Crownover books because I just don't think this was her element. I think she would be better in a more contemporary, normal situation that is less dramatic and weird. So 2-star book right there. Okay, moving into my 3-star section, I have 2 Helena Hunting books because I'm working my way through all of her books, and I'm touching on like her standalones because those are easy to like check off the list without investing in a series. So I picked up The Good Luck Charm by her, and this one I gave 3 stars. As I'm filming this review, I literally can't tell you the plot of it. Like, it already has been forgotten. So that right there will tell you why it's kind of lower on the list for me. Oh, that's right. Okay, it's following a girl who's a nurse, and she ends up having like her ex's father, so like her potential could have been father-in-law, ends up in her hospital with a stroke, and she ends up like taking care of him, and she kind of reopens the doors into her relationship that was abandoned in her past, and it's very traumatic for her. And there's a lot more that happens in the story that I honestly couldn't tell ya. I gave it 3 stars. I have thoughts, I'll get into them in the next book though, because I have similar thoughts about this book as I do with this one. So I also read Meet Cute by her, and I kind of want to talk about these simultaneously because these are both standalone adult contemporary romances. They got really cutesy covers, look super cute, but are not actually cute stories. Like, they're actually very heavy, dark stories, and I feel like the marketing was just like not quite right for these. So I liked this one a little bit more than this one, so let me talk about this one now. So Meet Cute looks precious and adorable, but this basically follows a girl who is obsessed with this like child star. He's kind of like a Disney Channel type of star that she was obsessed with her entire life, and they end up meeting in college. Like, he ends up going to her college and she is completely starstruck. They have like a little bit of a romance back then, and then he just ghosts her, and she has never gotten over that. She's always been hurt and abandoned over that. And there was this little like mishap that happens between them that she has never let go of, and she's always been bitter about, and it's kind of ruined their entire relationship, and they basically grow apart. So this story follows them years and years later when they are both successful lawyers, and he ends up coming to her law firm to set up a trust for his sister. So it's kind of rekindling their relationship, but she is still very bitter over whatever he did back in college. But okay, so that's kind of the setup for a cute little meet cute type story. But the story takes a turn because it turns very heavy very fast. Basically, his parents are killed in a car accident, and he becomes the sole provider for his kid sister. Like, they're like 13 years apart, I want to say, and he all of a sudden has to take on the like parenting role for his younger sister and does not know how to do it. And she is the trust fund lawyer who helped set it up, and also becomes the power of attorney or whatever for his sister. So she is very much legally involved in this situation, and she ends up just helping him figure out how to become a parent when he is not actually a parent to his sister. So this touches on a lot of really heavy things, and I actually really, really liked this book. I think that it handled the relationships between like families and how the dynamics can change in a situation like this. I think it handled it really, really well. And what I loved about this book is that his sister, who is I believe 13 in this book, she's a young teenager, she acts like a young teenager. I feel like in a lot of cases, specifically in like adult stories like this, when there are younger characters or there are like younger siblings or something, I feel like they are just kind of glossed over as being like just childish. I really liked that the sister in this book was one of the main characters, and she was very present in all of the decisions, and she acted her age. Like, she didn't act weird and older like sometimes authors do with young teenagers, and she also didn't act childish. Like, she was very rational about all of the things that are happening to her, and she had very realistic reactions to the situation. So I just wanted to touch on that with this. So this book is not as advertised. This is not a meet cute, fluffy little contemporary romance. This actually deals with really heavy topics, and I think it was handled really, really well. And I felt similarly with this book as well, where this looks like a really cute story, and how it's blurbed makes it seem like it's gonna be lighter and fluffier, but it ends up dealing with a lot heavier topics. So both of these I gave 3 stars. I like this one a little bit more. I think it was a little meatier, like it had more substance to it than this one, but I still really liked both of these. Do I think this is Helena Hunting's like strong point? No. Her Clipped Wings books are still my favorite by her, and her Puck series is a completely different type of story. So these fall in the middle, in my opinion. Her Clipped Wings books are very heavy and dark, and they deal with some triggering things. Like, there's a lot of content warnings in those books. The Puck series is just a really, really fun, laugh out loud sports romance, and I feel like these fall in the middle of those two types of storylines. I've talked way too much about these books already. Let me move on. Okay, moving on to my 4-star section of this video. The next book I want to talk about was my next Mariana Zapata book. Mariana Zapata is one of my favorite romance authors. She is quickly becoming an auto-buy author for me, and I have so far worked through most of her books, so I'm going through the ones that weren't like immediately jumping out at me when I started her books. So I read Lingus by her, and I loved it. I love all of her books. She is just the queen of the slow burn romance, and this one did not take itself too seriously, which I think was very refreshing, because a lot of her books, it's slow burn, but it's slow burn because there's so much to uncover about the characters that are in the relationship that it like takes a long time to get to a happy fun point with them. This one was just happy and from the beginning. So this basically follows a girl whose best friend is a porn star, and she brings her to a porn convention, and she ends up just hitting it off really well with this guy that she meets there, and it turns out he is a porn star. So it's their relationship and how she kind of has to like deal with that part of his life, and it was actually a really interesting look into sex workers' lifestyles, how complex it is, and I really kind of liked it, to be honest. While it was a very lighthearted story, it touched on a lot of things that you don't really think about when it comes to sex work and to being in porn, so it was very eye-opening, and honestly, the relationship was super, super fun. So in true Mariana Zapata fashion, while this is set at like a sex adult convention, there is very little sex on the page in this book, and it was just, I loved it. It was so fun. It was very short for one of her books, so I gave this one 4 stars. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed the relationship. Okay, the next book I just finished, and that is Say You'll Stay by Corinne Michaels. I wanted to start reading Corinne Michaels because I've seen a lot of emotional reviews of her books. So I picked this up because I knew that her books are very well loved. She's a very well loved romance author, and I knew that her books tend to get emotional. I was not prepared for the opening to this book. So I do want to give trigger warnings for this book because I think it might be important for some people because it's very triggering, but it is somewhat spoilery. Not so much for the book as a whole, but because everything that I'm going to talk about happens in chapter 1, so you were just thrown into a really tragic situation. But I will say, I think that going in blind to the situation, it hits you a lot harder. So if you don't want to be spoiled for it and you want to have that impact, skip to this timestamp. But if you want to have like trigger warnings just in case you're worried, here we go. This deals really heavily with suicide, and it is on page, not from the perspective of the person committing, but the person finding them afterwards. So basically, this opens to a woman who comes home from work, greets her twin boys, goes upstairs to find her husband, and he is hanging from the bathroom. And it is so emotional. And I think this speaks volumes for her as a writer, where I literally have never read a book from her before. I've never met these characters before, and within 10 pages of this book, I was sobbing. I think that really speaks volumes for her as an author. If you can create such an emotional response from your readers within the first chapter of your book, you are a really good writer. That's kind of my own perspective from it. It's hard to read, and you see the entire process of her finding his body, trying to get her kids out of the house, calling the paramedics, being on the phone with the 911 operator, and all the way up to his funeral, basically. You see the whole process. And I had to take a break. Literally after the first couple chapters of the book, I had to set it down because it was like too emotional for me. So, okay, that's all I'm going to talk about with actual spoilers in it, so you guys are safe now. Without giving spoilers, I wanted to let you guys know, who might have skipped ahead, that it is heavily emotional, and she is a phenomenal writer to create such an emotional response from me within the first chapter of the book. Just know I was sobbing openly. Basically takes her from the events that occur in the first couple chapters, and she ends up going back home to her family in, I want to say, Tennessee. It's a small town setting where her ex-fiance left her, and she has really hard memories, and she never wanted to go back to this place because she wanted to move on with her life, and now she is forced to come back to this town with her kids, and it is the romance that gets rekindled there. That's all I'm going to say about the book. I loved it. I am definitely going to continue with all of her books now, because just from the emotional response that I had from the very first impression that I had from her books, she's a phenomenal romance writer. So I gave that 4 stars. I've been talking a lot in this video. This was supposed to be the shorter video, and it's just as long. Okay, let's move from my 4-star into my 5-star section. So I started the Black Dagger Brotherhood series this month. it was time. I've never read them. I know that's shocking, but I think I was way too young when I was in my vampire phase to actually like read these books or want to read them, because I was like a young teenager when I was in full-blown vampire mode. So it's been really fun to kind of get back into paranormal romance, but get back into paranormal romance with like the actual sexual content that I'm looking for as an adult. So I have only actually read book 1 and book 2 so far. These are the first 2 that I got to. I gave this one 4 stars and I gave this one 5 stars. So this is my transition from 4 to 5 stars in this video. So this was glorious. Like, 1, you can't really tell how dated it is, considering these books have been coming out for like decades at this point. It doesn't read that old. Like, yes, there's definitely some fashion choices that are made in this first book where I was like, oh, we're in Buffy era. But it was just like exactly what I was looking for when it came to like a vampire sexy time romance, because there is some steam in these books. Like, I knew there was going to be some sex on the page, but like, oh man, there was some sex on the page. It was great. So this one follows Wrath and his story and how he kind of is like the king of the vampire world. This introduces you to the whole concept of the Brotherhood, and this one follows Rage and his relationship, and I loved Rage and his little beast self thing. So these are the only 2 that I've read so far, and I am in the world. Like, I am ready to binge through the next 18 books. Avoiding spoilers for the series for people who haven't read it, this one was 4 stars. I liked this one a little bit more just because it gave me the full glimpse into the world that I'm getting into, and it set everything up really well. I am mainly waiting for Zeta's book. I think that's the next one, or the 4th book, because all of these books follow like a different brother or a different side character and their romance and their involvement in the world. I'm waiting for Zeta's because he's so far my most intriguing and my favorite character that I've seen in it. This was my first foray into a J.R. Ward, and I am hooked. I can't wait to continue on. And moving into my favorite book that I read in the month of August, that is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. I adored this book to pieces. This was so good. I had an arc of this, so I read this early. It also got released from Book of the Month early. It was a Book of the Month pick, and I'm just like so proud of her. So this is an adult contemporary romance that's set at a Renaissance festival, which there are not enough books set at Ren Fairs, because I'm a Ren Fair nerd. I've been a Ren Fair nerd my entire life. Like, I've had season passes since I was in middle school. I'm one of those people, okay? I get dressed up. It's a whole shebang. So seeing Ren Fair in an adult contemporary romance when I'm in the midst of my romance exploration was so perfect. It was just perfect timing for me. So I loved this book. This follows a girl who moves in with her sister and her niece because her sister was in a car accident and she's really struggling with like taking care of her daughter. So she moves in with her to help take care of them and just do basic household things. And she ends up getting volunteered to work at a Ren Fair with her niece, and she becomes a tavern wench. And it's a love-hate story with her and the coordinator of this Ren Fair, because he is such like an obnoxious stickler of a guy who turns real sexy when he puts on his pirate pants. I loved it so much. I swooned through the whole thing. I smiled through the whole thing. And she's already writing book 2. And I was so excited to see that she's continuing with the Ren Fair setting. So I believe we're following her friend in book 2, and I can't wait. I was so worried that this was just going to be like a standalone and that's all I was going to get from Ren Fair romance, but no, we're getting more. I'm so excited. If you're a fan of like Christina Lauren or any of the like Helen Huang books or any of the really cute fluffy contemporaries that are coming out right now, you're gonna love this book. It's so good. I gave it 5 stars. It was my favorite book of the month, which is saying something because I read some like stellar books this month. I just keep thinking about this and I keep wanting to pick it back up and reread it. So I gave this 5 stars. That's enough talking for today. Oh my god, those are all of the books that I read in the month of August. I hope you guys enjoyed my wrap up in 2 parts. It was a lot of talking. I need to go sit down and have a beverage because my throat is sore now. So that's going to be it for this wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in my next video.